All right, well, good evening. Welcome back. We are going ahead and get started with our dedication ceremony this evening. I'm going to bring forth again our superintendent, Dr. Sonona Thomas, to provide some remarks about the importance of this space and the importance of the dedication to our wonderful former board member, Mr. Vernon Payne.
Okay. Good evening again. This time it's actually evening. And welcome back to those of you who stayed with us. We thank you for being here. Tonight we have the opportunity to honor one of our former board members who served tirelessly from, I think, 1979 to 2018 on the Clark County School District Board of Education, and that is Mr. Vernon Payne. The name Vernon Payne is synonymous with many adjectives, phrases, stories, and amazing memories to those who have had the privilege of working with him and knowing him. If you know Mr. Payne, you would know that he's compassionate, he's committed, he's honest, he's strong, he's a builder not just of homes and businesses, but of people and of opportunities. If you know Mr. Payne, you know he has the biggest hands in the world. His hands stand out when he reaches you and hugs you and embraces you. You know that he stands for integrity and that he's open and transparent and genuine and truly a strong advocate for children and for Clark County School District. Mr. Payne has been known for his work not only locally with education, but across the state of Georgia as he served in the Georgia School Boards Association for a number of years and has left a mark with them that will never be forgotten. Everyone who's had the privilege of working with him speaks of him as a tireless advocate for children and for education, and recognizing that education is truly the only way that we can change lifetime opportunities for children. And so we will forever be indebted to Mr. Payne for what he has done for Clark County schools, for the legacy that he leaves with us as a school district. So we appreciate him and we appreciate his family being here with us today as we celebrate and recognize him.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. We are now going to invite several board members who have served with Mr. Payne to the podium to briefly speak about his service and commitment to education. We will start with Mr. Greg Davis, and then Ms. Linda Davis, Mr. Charles Worthy, and then Mr. Jim Warrens. So, Mr. Davis?
It's okay. Yes, I had asked Dr. Harris that I was going to introduce Mr. Warrens because Mr. Warrens and I represent kind of the bookends of Mr. Payne's service on the board. Mr. Warrens was at the beginning and I was at the end. He and I would sit side by side at board meetings, but the thing that I remember most about Dr. Payne, Mr. Payne, is his dedication towards the students. Every question that he would ask would always be involved about the students. And in terms of board business, what I remember so vividly is going to National School Board Association's meetings with him, and there was like, he knew everyone who was there. In actuality, he had just met them. But we would go to different workshops and meet up, and he would always have 2 or 3 people with him from different school districts, and he would be talking to them, and he introduced me to them. And he was just someone, he was a people person, and he always felt like he could go to these conferences and learn from other school districts and bring that knowledge back here. The second thing that I do remember about Mr. Payne is when he was our representative in this district for the Georgia School Board Association, and he did that for many, many years. And he made it his business to visit all 15 different school boards around this area that were in his district. And I haven't seen it happen since. And so I just remember Mr. Payne as someone who loved students, loved people, and served the school district just tremendously. Thank you.
had hoped to take the easy way out and just say exactly what they said and 10 times more. But let me take this opportunity to tell you a little bit about Mr. Payne that I experienced in my 12 years on the board. Mr. Payne was that person who, like Ovita Thornton, who's here, was a nurturer, right? If you're new on the board and you didn't know what you were doing, he didn't mind telling you. And he would share with you the best practices and how to go about doing things. When he found out that his wife taught me at Athens High School Spanish for 2 years, I got favor. So thank you, Mrs. Hawk Payne, Mrs. Ruth Payne, that I enjoyed that relationship. A part of Mr. Payne that you might not know was he was a nurturer, and so he had such a great relationship with Miss Thornton especially. I remember her saying to me that, I check on him all the time. And so he and Miss Thornton showed me what I should have been doing as a board member, and that was building relationships across our different districts, because Ovita was that person who, if Mr. Payne was going to be at the GSBA, she was going to be there to support him and to help him throughout those last years. So I saw him as a very strong leader when I first came on the board in 2012, and he was still out and about. He was 100% on top of everything that happened in facilities management and in new construction. He told me what to look for. He told me how to try and get along with the plant services people and the kinds of questions I should ask. So I just appreciate the fact that he was a nurturer, that he cared about relationships, he cared about people, and there wasn't a child that he met that he wasn't willing to go the extra mile to help. So I think this is a very worthwhile thing to do. I think it's important that we recognize that he truly stood for what he said. He said what he meant, and he meant what he said, and I know that's not something new to his children. So thank you all for being here and for helping us support and honor Mr. Payne's legacy.
Good evening. And let me begin by saying this is truly, truly a historical day, and remembering the legacy of Mr. Vernon Payne. And I would be remiss if I didn't say this. When I retired from principal of Cedar Shoals High School, and having been an educator and run a high school, I just knew that I knew all that I needed to know about being a board member. Not true. Mr. Payne was truly, truly a role model for me. And I want to say this, Mr. Payne served 40 plus years on this Board of Education. 40 plus faithful years. As some have already said, he also served on the board of directors at GSBA. That's Georgia School Boards Association. And I don't know whether Mrs. Henry was the CEO at GSBA at the time. She may not be here today. But I vividly remember this. When Mr. Payne married, she said, I walked up to, she always called him Vernon, and he had his tuxedo on, and I looked on his left lapel, and that was his GSBA pen. I purposely wore this pen today with pride, simply because of Mr. Payne. And as Mr. Greg Davis said to you a few minutes ago, he served in that position religiously. And when he fell into some bad health, GSBA named him Emeritus Board of Directors because of his outstanding work. And I know someone said earlier that, Mr. Payne, his legacy and all, one thing that you remembered about him, we've all heard this commercial, E.F. Hutton. When he spoke, people listened. You had to, because that voice of his. And I can tell you, I am so proud to stand here this evening and say these things about Mr. Payne. And serving as a board of directors for GSBA, and as Greg Davis said, it was about 15 districts that he represented. And he made sure to visit all of those districts. And he did it religiously for this total number of years that he served as a director and also on this Board of Education. Yeah, Sidney Ann Waters, she can attest to this. Mr. Payne would always say, it's about the children. Somewhere in this boardroom, a meeting room here, perhaps we need to have those words painted on the wall. It's about the children. As I was reading an article this morning, and I thought of Mr. Payne's, it said, save the children. And that's what it's about. And we have to continue to do that. In closing, let me say this. They're going to do an unveiling in a few minutes here. Unveiling of a portrait of Mr. Payne. When I made this resolution or proposal to the Board of Education that obviously passed, I said to the superintendent, it would be nice if we would have a portrait painted. And present board members, also future board members, you're going to be under the watchful eyes of Mr. Payne forever. Forever. Wherever you look at in this room here, you're going to see and hear Mr. Payne. And if you mess it up and you're not doing some things or making the correct vote to serve children, you're going to be under the watchful eyes of Mr. Vernon Payne. I said closing, but I feel compelled to say this. Is Michael Payne here today? There he is. Okay. I first met Mr. Payne. My wife and I moved here in 1975. I was a classroom teacher at Cedar Shoals High School. And Walter Payne was the oldest son at Cedar Shoals at the time. Of course, Michael came along and then Quazon. And I talked with Michael, I think it was last Wednesday, and he said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be at my dad's house on a Friday, and I'm going to have him to give you a call. We'll be on a three-way. So that's fine. And I tell you, we talked for about 2.5 hours. And finally, Michael said, you know, Mr. Worthy, we have had church here. I said, well, that's the way Mr. Payne would want it, okay? He was a faithful man, and whatever he did, he had to do it with the watchful eye of God. Thank you very much for coming, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this because I have seen so many people that I haven't seen in a while. With the pandemic, you know, you're locked up, but I was so happy to see so many of you coming. Enjoy. Thank you very much.
I feel sort of like Linda. Everybody's already said most of this, but it was my privilege to serve on the Board of Education with Mr. Vernon Payne from 1980 to 1985. And during that time, it was the beginnings of a relationship because I knew him not only as a colleague on the board, but also as a builder and as a friend. He was a man of principle, integrity, and fairness. He believed in getting things done. I remember that the four of us were tasked driving down to South Georgia. We were on a superintendent search, and we were going down to check out the prospective candidate. And we had to leave here about 4:30 in the morning to get down to where we were headed, almost to the Florida line, by about 8:30. And as we rolled into town, Vernon turned to the rest of us, and he says, take me by the funeral home and drop me off. He said, I can find out what I need to find out. So we dropped him off at the funeral home. And he said, come back and pick me up about 10:30. And so we went on to the other appointments that we had, but we swung back by and picked him up. He was a team player, but he was fulfilling his part of the team because he knew in the community that that's where he could find out about this man that was the superintendent that we were looking at. I knew him as a builder. I had a fire at my house, and Vernon did the fire restoration. He remodeled my office building on 2 different occasions. And on the second one, we were putting in a spiral staircase from the back corner from the ground floor up into what was our library. And we'd ordered this wooden staircase that came in pieces. It was a kit. And he was fascinated by it. And he helped us, number one, cut into the floor and shore up the floor so it would bear the weight of this. And number two, because it was going up a story and a half, he devised a brace so that it wouldn't wobble in the middle. But about 3 years later, he was doing a restoration for somebody else, and they had a room with sort of a balcony, and he had talked the homeowner into putting in a spiral staircase. And so he called me and he says, where did I order this staircase? And I told him and what he needed, and he ordered the staircase, and it got delivered. And he called me up and says, you need to come help me put this in. And I said, I'll be more than happy to. So I showed up on the appointed morning, and Vernon and I put that staircase together and put it there. He believed in his building trade that things were done with quality and they were done on time. And that's what he lived with. One day, he and his wife Shirley and my wife and I traveled over to central Alabama to a place where I'm on the board of directors of a mission school. And we needed to do some work on the dining hall there. It was under construction. It was all volunteer. And so I talked Vernon into going, and the 4 of us drove over there. And we were putting a soffit on the outside of this building. He and I were working together. And Ken Corson, who is the executive director, of course, came up and wanted to meet Vernon and so on, got to know him. Found out he'd grown up on the farm in Franklin County, Georgia. And Ken wanted to talk about kudzu and what could be done with kudzu. Well, Vernon had spent his childhood and his teenage years chopping kudzu with a hoe. He absolutely hated kudzu. He did not want to talk about kudzu, but he was polite. When the board changed from appointed to elected, Vernon called me up and he says, I need for you to come help me out with my campaign. I said, Vernon, I'll be right there. Tell me what I need to do. So I showed up on the appointed day, and he had it all organized. He had all the streets lined out. He had all the registered voters identified. He had the literature parceled out. And so we took off on our assigned things and went from door to door. And I got a new appreciation of Vernon that day. That's some of the easiest campaigning I've ever done, because all I had to do is say, I'm here campaigning for Vernon Payne, and they start telling me how wonderful he was. So he loved people, and everybody has said this, and it's true. So at Quazon's wedding reception, and Vernon comes up to me and he looks out over the crowd there that's at the reception, and he leans down and he says, I love the salt and pepper crowd. He just loved all kinds of people. But it's been said before, and this is the bottom on my notes, his bottom line on all of his board education decisions is this the best thing for the children of the Clark County School District? And Mr. Worthy, I think you had a great idea. I think that ought to be painted on about that level where those air conditioning vents are, so that everybody that walks into this room sees, is this the best thing for the children of the Clark County School District?
Wow, what an honor to be in a room present for a dedication for such a wonderful man. Before we move on to the dedication and the unveiling of the portrait, we are going to invite the Cedar Shoals High School Band, under the direction of the Director of Bands, Dr. Belle McRoy, to give us a selection. They are behind you. Yes, yes, give it up for the Cedar Shoals High School Band under the direction of Dr. Belle McRoy. Thank you. So it's wild because as we think about the legacy of Mr. Payne and what our board members have said here today as they spoke about him saying, focus on the students, how does this help students, our amazing students in the back. So thank you to the Cedar Shoals High School Band. Thank you to our band director, band assistant director, so you can see the impact that music has on our students. They're truly talented. So we are now getting to the point of our program. We're going to invite Dr. Lakeisha Gant, President of the Board of Education, as well as our Superintendent, Dr. Sedona Thomas, to come to the front as we begin to unveil the portrait of Mr. Payne and his watchful eye that will continue to live on in the boardroom. And then Dr. Thomas will say a few words. So.
And I will be brief, but I thank again the Cedar Shoals Band. I thank the Athens Community Career Academy students for their work, for their culinary services, and then the students who provided the artwork. Having all of these areas included today helps to remind us that it is about the children. It is truly about the children. So at this time, for Mr. Vernon Payne in his absence, but with his family here, in honor of your service and your commitment to the Clark County School District and the Clark County Board of Education, we hereby dedicate this space in your honor with your name. Henceforth, from this day forward, this space shall be referred to as the Vernon Payne Meeting Hall. To mark this occasion, we would like to now unveil this portrait by local artist and former Clark County School District student, Mr. Broderick Flanagan. He was here with us earlier, but he had to leave. But now at this time, we will unveil the photo in honor of Mr. Payne. Thank you all so much, and now I have the honor of inviting Mr. Walter Payne, Mr. Payne's son, to the stage to give us our final remarks for this evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, first, let me say this. I don't know who that person is. I heard everything. That can't be the same Vernon Payne that I know. But with all seriousness, our dad was very serious about education. Without education, you can't do anything. He was very, very motivated to have every student receive the very best education they could. I'll keep my remarks short because everyone else has already taken all my remarks, so I would like to say thank you on behalf of both families, the Payne and Hawk families, to our board members. Thank you, Mr. Worthy. And to the Cedar Shoals Band, 72 to 76. I was there. Thank you. And to everyone else, thank you for coming and enjoy your evening.
You said short, Mr. Payne. You really meant short, didn't you? Well, we appreciate you all. Thank you for having shared your father. I know when you have a parent that works in service and gives of service, it takes from family a lot of times. And all of these trips we heard about, his work, we know, our board members that are sitting here, how much time that can take from families in the evenings. It's a sacrifice. It is a gift of love. It's a gift of caring. So we thank you on behalf of the Clark County School District family for giving and sharing your father for so many years to something he cared so deeply about. So this does conclude our program. We have several people, Ms. Lisa Palmer, Ms. Angela Tillman, Mr. Troy Bassett, Mr. John Gilbert are here if anyone would like a brief tour of the building. If you get one and you're able to find your way back out, you should be on staff because we have to look at a map every day to figure out where we're going. And I still just ride the elevator up and down and just get off and then find stairs to get me back to where I'm supposed to be. But if you would like a tour, we will have people outside available to give you a brief tour. Once again, we thank you for being here. Thank you all for your hard work. To all of our team members, Dr. Harris and your staff for making today possible, for organizing this event. Again, to the Payne and the Hawk family, thank you for being here with us. Thank you to all of our community members, former board members, current board members, students, parents, and others who joined us today. We realize that it's a sacrifice to give up evening time, and we thank you for being here. Have a wonderful evening and a safe journey home. I asked if y'all gonna ride back there. I don't know how it works, but I'm gonna do that.
Make it go ride. Make it go.